All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. Today we are going to be talking about HyperDocs and how we can use them to enhance student learning in our classrooms, both through distance learning and back when we get into our brick and mortar classrooms. So first thing we're going to just kind of start off with is, what is a HyperDoc? Because we might be talking about this and you might be thinking, okay, this sounds cool, but what exactly is a HyperDoc? So it is a enhancement and engagement tool where students can kind of almost teach themselves, and it's very interactive, and it replaces worksheets, lectures, things like that. And so it kind of is a way to kind of bring the content to them, and they kind of go through it on their own or in groups, kind of at their own pace, depending on how you have it set up. And they kind of do the learning on their own. And then it really lets you as the teacher kind of just be the facilitator of the lesson or the activity that you guys are working on.
And so HyperDocs, it's not something Marshall or I created. It was actually created by Kelly, Lisa, and Sarah. And they actually wrote a book about it called the HyperDoc Handbook. They have a website called hyperdocs.co where they have so many free resources, free templates. They even have free courses that you could go through as a teacher. They have a Facebook group where on Saturday they have just a free kind of lecture all about it. It's interactive. You can ask questions. So these three ladies came up with HyperDocs, and they saw WebQuests, and WebQuests are something different, and we'll get into the difference between HyperDocs and WebQuests in a little bit. But they really kind of put together this whole idea of student-centered learning where a teacher is facilitating all the learning through an interactive, communicating, collaborative way, all through a HyperDoc.
And so what is a HyperDoc? So a HyperDoc is transformative, it is interactive, it's personalized, it's engaging, and it's like we said, it's a tool to help us facilitate student learning and student creativity and collaboration. It's not a substitution, so it's not just, okay, I'm going to do this HyperDoc instead of teaching a lesson. It's not just a digital version of a worksheet. It's not just another way to kind of disseminate information to just be consumed by your kids. It's a way for them to consume it and interact with it. And it's not inflexible, it is very flexible. So these are just kind of some what they are, what they're not.
And so just more kind of showing you like what they are, what they're not. A HyperDoc is not just a Google Doc with links. So you're not just writing a sentence and saying, okay, to explore all about the Roman Empire, click here. To watch a video, click here. It's not a pre-made curriculum program. It's not a new app or a new web tool. So there's nothing new to technically learn for you as the teacher. It's a carefully crafted digital lesson that has this mindset as you're creating it where you're cultivating the student collaboration and the student communication within their groups to give your students this engaging packaged learning experience. So students are learning themselves through collaboration, they're critically thinking, they're connecting with each other, and they're creating. So students are in charge of their own learning through this teacher facilitated process.
And so when we start talking about HyperDocs, we used to, everybody kind of knows the whole WebQuest thing. And so a lot of people think, oh, is it just kind of like a WebQuest? Well, they are different. And so we're just going to kind of break down the differences between them. So a HyperDoc allows students to collaborate with one another through links embedded in a doc. And then it's allowing them to do that through sharing before, during, or after that lesson. A web quest is just a document that has links that gives them to a specific site. So a HyperDoc is something that it can either be created within a doc or through links embedded in a document. And so in this process, students really show what they know. And then a document with just hyperlinks it doesn't really give them any type of opportunity to show what they know on the document. And so the differences between WebQuest and HyperDocs is a WebQuest is more of just a document with hyperlinks that takes them to specific sites, takes them to specific information, where a HyperDoc has those elements, but it allows the students to create, collaborate. It kind of cultivates their learning. It allows them to engage in the content, and it isn't just kind of one way. It allows them to, like I said, it allows them to interact with the content, allows them to create things. It allows them to really show their learning, not just leading them to sites and information.
So the essence of the best HyperDoc is exploration. So this quote by Benjamin Franklin, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I may learn," is kind of the basis within the HyperDoc. So what you're doing is you pick a topic, you pick something that you would normally stand in front of the classroom and lecture to your students for 10 minutes about, or something that would take a full week. And instead you're kind of using this 5E format to engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and you're using this format to create a lesson where your students are working together in a group to piece it all together. So you're giving them little snippets here and there, and they're going to create their understanding of the topic. They're going to read and research and watch and talk and communicate, and they're going to put all of this together and then show their learning to you in a specific way that they choose. So the students are being involved firsthand in their learning instead of just being kind of just the receptors of that information.
So why would you want to use HyperDocs? So like we said, the best HyperDocs blend content with essential skills of collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. So a good HyperDoc is going to incorporate all of those things. It's going to incorporate collaboration and communication and critical thinking and creativity. And so why would you want to use a HyperDoc? Because you're giving your students those opportunities to collaborate, communicate, critically think, and create, all within one kind of platform. And so this example here is going to go to a math example of a HyperDoc that you can click on your version of the presentation. And then you're just going to want to make sure that you go through and click File, Make a Copy, and then you can go through and you can kind of interact with this HyperDoc just to kind of get an idea of how it's set up and kind of the process that your students would go through when they are interacting with a HyperDoc.
And then I wanted to kind of go through some things that you could see on this HyperDoc. So it starts with just the students wondering. And the wonder question that they get for proportional reasoning is about a cake designer. And so they're thinking about a cake designer and why would they need to know proportional reasoning? So now you've given them the why and you're connecting it with the real world experience. Then they're doing an activity where they're going to kind of learn and there's that 25 miles per hour sign. And then they're reviewing something. And then when it's practice, it tells them to form a small group of 3. So you've got collaboration and communication already built into this. And then there's word problems and everything's got a picture. Everything has explanation. Everything is set to form your students with that critical thinking communication mindset, especially in a small group setting. And then it also frees up you as the teacher to be able to give those students who need more hands-on one-on-one time, it gives you that chance to do that as well.
And then the nice thing with this example too is it's bringing in that collaboration and that critical thinking and that creativity piece, but it's also giving your students choice. So you'll notice that it'll say form a small group of 3, but then it says choose a word problem. So you're not dictating what problem they need to do, but they get to kind of have a little bit of choice. You are kind of setting the guidelines, but they're getting to choose what problem that they want to do. And then step 3, they're going to choose the tool to kind of show their learning. So if they want to do a Google Slides thing, or if they want to do a Flipgrid, whatever, kind of whatever you have set out, but you're giving them that choice. So they're going to take advantage of that, and they're going to kind of buy into it more because they are getting to kind of choose how they're going to show something, how they're going to practice it, and then how they're going to show their learning.
Yep, I agree. And so when we look at HyperDocs, there are so many amazing ways and reasons to use them in your classroom. It gives you an innovative teaching and learning experience for your students. It's extremely student-centered, just like you saw with that math example on the last slide. You can support differentiation. So just by having the students choose their own math problems, you could have your higher students in the class choose one of those 4 math problems that was a little more difficult, Or maybe it's a student who's like, you know what, I like this one. It seems a little easier than the other four. So me and my group are going to choose that one. So you're allowing that differentiation throughout the entire HyperDoc. You're able to have your learners connect to those resources and tools just by giving them that choice. You can have this blended learning. You can have it online. You can have it face-to-face. So HyperDocs is something, especially now during distance learning and when we go back in our brick and mortar classrooms, that we can do all the time. And then, like I had mentioned before, it frees you up to give you time to support those students who need that individualized learning. So you have all of your students that are being self-sufficient and they're just going to ask you questions if they're confused along the way, but you also have a little more extra time versus if you were standing up in front of the class just delivering the material. You can also have amazing ways to kind of connect to all of these different tech tools. You're connecting to your standards throughout. It's supporting the 4Cs, just the HyperDocs in general, with communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, and you can put formative assessments at the end as like a Google form or a drawing or an artistic piece of work, a video, to kind of make sure that your students are able to show you their learning throughout the end.
Okay, so a true HyperDoc is, like we've been saying this whole time, much more than just a document with some links on it. It, it deliberately chooses web tools to give students the opportunity to engage with the content, explore the content, explain the content, apply their learning, share it with their group members and you as the teacher. It allows them to reflect on what they've learned. It allows them to extend their learning. It allows for digital collaboration, and it gives every student a voice and gives them a chance to be heard by their other classmates. It gives them choice. It allows them to critically think. It allows them to problem solve, and it gives them the opportunity to create authentic digital artifacts to show what they know and how they can kind of connect to a wider audience. So it's much more than just, hey, I'm going to put a doc together with a bunch of hyperlinks and now I have a HyperDoc. So it's more than that. It's allowing them, like we've said, it's allowing them to interact with the content, is allowing them to explain and explore and apply what they've learned and kind of share what they know and reflect on what they've learned, all within this one kind of format.
And a lovely tip that's not just great for HyperDocs, but it's great just for us teachers in general, is that we don't always have to know how to use all the tools and apps that we're asking our students to use. Our students are brilliant, regardless of if they're in kindergarten or if they're seniors in high school. Even throughout that entire span, they are brilliant, they're thinkers, they're creative. They will figure it out and help each other, and then they can help you too. Technology is always changing, and it's really hard for us as teachers to keep up. So just trust yourself and trust your students. One of the things that teachers are always saying in their classroom is they stand up in front of the class and they say, so I heard about this cool new tool. I have no idea how to use it. Let's figure it out together. Period one, you know nothing, and then they teach you a little bit. Period two, you start that and you're like, okay, I've learned 2 things about this tool that period one taught me. Let's see if we could do better. And you just go through the day and they're helping you build your skills and they're building each other's skills together. So don't let that fear hold you back. Remember that. Just trust your students. Say, this is something new. Let's just figure it out together.
And I just think that's a great way to model, like, just that you're a lifelong learner and we don't know all the answers and it's okay to not know all the answers, but we can kind of work through it together. And as a group, we can come to a, collaborative, like answer or whatever. And we can kind of work together to kind of figure things out.
Yep.
So HyperDocs can take on 2 forms. It's mostly known for being used through Google Docs, but you can also use it through Google Slides. And so we're going to kind of go through some examples of how you could set this up and what it might look like. But these are kind of the 2 forms that a HyperDoc can take. It can be done within a Google Doc or it can be done within a Google Slide.
So for a HyperDoc done inside of a Google Doc, you have all your links, all your videos, everything is just packaged in a Google Doc. And so if you click on the bottom, I'm not sure why the font got all funky, but if you click on the bottom where the link is, where it says click here, it'll actually open up to a template for a Google Doc, and it'll show you different examples. So it'll show you how that Google Doc is actually set up. And then the picture, it's just showing you one that headed to high school. So this is something that you could do with your 8th graders toward the end of the year or even the beginning of the year to kind of get their mindset thinking about, okay, why am I here? What are these next steps? And so you're kind of cultivating this collaborative classroom right from the beginning.
So HyperDocs as a Google slide deck is going to be a little different. So in a Google Doc, everything's on that one page, or you're kind of scrolling through the pages. And so within a HyperDoc in Google Slides, it's going to go over multiple slides, and depending on what they choose, it might take them to a different slide in the slide deck, and depending on how they're going to want to show their learning or what resources they might want to be using, it might take them to different parts of the slide deck. So just like on the last slide, if you click where it says click here, it's going to take you to some examples of HyperDocs in Google Slides, and then it'll kind of show you a template and kind of walk you through what that looks like and kind of what the experience is when you are going through a HyperDoc that's in a Google Slides format.
And so HyperDocs can contain a video. They can contain something that you need to click and read. And just like pro tips, so if you're including a video, make sure that you have headphones and earbuds that are available to your students. Otherwise, if you're in your brick and mortar classroom, you're going to have sound everywhere coming from all over. So make sure you at least have a couple sets, or you tell your kids to bring them in. And then if you're having your students click and read something, if you're making your HyperDoc, just kind of use the same basic colors throughout. So if you're going to make it blue for something that they click, always make it blue from then on. If you're going to make it red, always make it red. Just kind of stick with a certain format and keep it consistent throughout. That way, all of the students, they know, oh, it's blue, I need a click. It's blue and underlined, I need a click. It's yellow, I need this. It's green, I need this. So that's just a way when you're formatting your HyperDocs for yourself to just kind of keep it going. And also, if like anything that you have your students complete within a group, if you have a background color for that, then your eyes will automatically gravitate to that color. That way you're not scanning the entire document for where you think their writing might be.
So all HyperDocs must contain the following. So they must contain collaboration, whether that's on a Padlet, whether that's on slides, whether that's in the classroom, whether that be physical classroom, Google Classroom, stuff like that. It should contain adding responses to something like a whiteboard or a Post-it or a Jamboard or Canvas or Google Classroom or Google Draw. And it should contain having areas where students can talk in groups. They can have a discussion board. They can make an audio track. We talked about making audio tracks with podcasting yesterday. So you can incorporate that. You can incorporate them making a video, whether that's through something like Flipgrid or Screencastify, something like that. So it's including all of these elements. It's interactive and it's collaborative.
And so when creating a HyperDoc, you want to use like different verbiage as well. So you want to use engage, explore, create, collaborate, apply, analyze, interact. Stay away from the words like finish, complete, submit, do this, because those kind of take away that expansive idea of the students being creative with it. And then include activities. Give your students choice and student voice, like in the math example that Marshall pointed out, that it has the students choose a word problem out of 4. It has a student choose a tool to create something. So give them that choice, because then they have that buy-in. It doesn't matter what format you get their answer in. It doesn't matter if they picked A, B, C, or D for the word problem. They're doing it. They're doing one. But they're more attached to the one that they chose. And then also definitely just include some type of formative assessment at the end. It could be where they're drawing a picture of the process. It could be a Google form, but it doesn't always have to be a Google form. It can be anything. They could be creating a collage with pictures. They can be creating something on Google Slides with just pictures. They could be writing and linking to something. They could be drawing with an actual pen and paper. They could be doing an audio. You can even give your students student choice within the formative assessment. Here's a Google form if you want to do it that way. You could draw a picture this way. You could create a video. Give them that type of environment where they could choose where they can succeed the greatest and where they're able to show you what they have learned and the best way for them. And there are some examples to the right-hand side of the slide that you can click on your own copy of the slide. So if you want to see an example of a student voice in HyperDoc and you want to see an example of student choice in a HyperDoc, just go ahead and click where it's underlined right there, where the arrows are pointing to, and you'll be able to see a HyperDoc that really shows all of that. That way you have that example and that visualization for you to see, okay, this is what we mean by student voice. This is what we mean by student choice.
So 3 ways to create a HyperDoc. So you can create one just from scratch, and we've linked to a template that is going to kind of walk you through how you can just create it from scratch. The nice thing too is you can use a template. And so HyperDocs, that team has an abundance amount of templates already created. So if you're looking for, math examples, ELA examples, science, social studies, they have it all kind of categorized and organized for you. So you can just click on where it says template, and it's going to take you to their template page where it's going to have tons of templates there for you already made. And then if you want to kind of remix a HyperDoc that you see, but you kind of want to make it your own, they have a samples page, and they have HyperDocs that are already created that have everything in there. They have all the elements. They have all the
Yep.
all the things in there. I don't know why I'm blanking on what word I'm trying to choose right now, but they have
All the different like examples and collaborative ways, and everything's literally done.
Yes, they have all the elements in there. They have the articles, they have the videos, they have everything in there for you. But then maybe you see that and you're like, I like this part, but I kind of want to change this part. Go to the samples page, find one that you like, make a copy of it, and then make it your own. So they have resources for you to kind of get you started where you don't have to just start with a blank canvas and go, okay, how am I going to work this? How am I going to do this? They have templates for you made. They have samples already. So if you are just kind of thinking, okay, this sounds really awesome and I want to see how it's going to work in my class, go to the samples page, find one that looks interesting to you and make a copy of it and go through it like you're a student and see, okay, what's this going to look like for my students? And then that kind of gets you in the mind frame of how a HyperDoc works. And then you can take that sample, alter it for your own class, or you can go to the templates and then you can start inserting your own resources and stuff in there. So they have definitely resources for you to kind of get started so you're not just starting with a blank canvas and trying to figure out how you're going to navigate this whole thing.
And so one of the great things about HyperDocs is that you're having this collaboration, but you're also able to connect your HyperDocs to DOK levels and also the SAMR model. So next week on Tuesday, we're going to kind of dive into what the SAMR model is, but just a short overview is the SAMR model is just a model that's out to kind of describe your use of technology in your classroom. And so just starting at the very beginning, if you're making a HyperDoc, you could be aligning your HyperDoc to substitution and level 1 DOK levels. So your lesson is just acting as a substitute for paper, but you're just using the computer. And then level 1 DOK levels, you're just having students recall, name, match, record, illustrate. They're not really diving deep into it. So you can kind of analyze the HyperDoc that you're creating, or they analyze the HyperDoc that you're pulling from online to kind of look at, okay, what are these DOK levels that I'm asking my students to do? How much critical thinking am I having them do? What exactly do I want them to do? And you can also scaffold your HyperDoc to start at the level 1 DOK levels and then end at level 3, level 4.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to say that it's okay for a HyperDoc to have multiple levels in there. Like it's okay that some parts are just level 1 where you're just wanting them to kind of just get started, recall some information, just kind of get them in the mindset of what you're working on. And then you can move it up and you can have those level 2, level 3 interactions in there as well.
Oh, definitely. Because entire HyperDoc made of level 3 and level 4, that's just going to be so intense for your students that they're not really going to get any learning out of it. They're going to be so stressed, and when you're stressed, the learning doesn't occur.
Yeah. And then so now we're moving on to level 2 and augmentation. So this is kind of like the next step in the SAMR model. So this is where you're incorporating maybe some literacy, some assessments, some copying, using an assessment that was maybe previously created in a doc, and you're augmenting it to maybe using the share feature. So now they're kind of sharing that with others. And now you're at maybe a level 2 DOK level. So maybe they are converting some things. Maybe they're distinguishing between, two different things. They're organizing something, they're representing things, they're interpreting data. So now we're just kind of taking it to the next step. And this could be obviously implemented in a HyperDoc.
And then now this is looking at modification within the SAMR model and a level 3 DOK levels. So this is where you're really getting the transformation within your students and within their learning. So modification with the SAMR model, this is where your students are communicating, they're interacting with the information, they're interacting with feedback that they get, they're practicing, they're examining different sets of the information. And then with the DOK level 3s, they're citing evidence, they're comparing and contrasting. There's a differentiated concept for them. They're able to differentiate between what's happening. They're developing their own voice and purpose. They're investigating. So there's a lot going on within the level 3 and within the modification of the SAMR model, and these two concepts go together. So usually when you're using level 3 questions or level 3 within the DOK level of activities that students are doing, you want to make sure that it's also going along with like the modification era within the SAMR model with the use of technology.
And then finally, we get to level 4 DOK, which is critical thinking, and then redefinition, which is their tech integration. And so we're having them create things with technology that would not be possible without the technology. So maybe they are creating a podcast, maybe they're creating a video project, maybe they're developing a game or a website, something like that. They're collaborating together and combining ideas. They're connecting their, what they've learned on maybe social media or stuff that they've read online, and they're sharing those ideas, and they're using tools to kind of socially interact with each other. They're getting to enable their voice and choice. So they're driven with projects that provide opportunities for them to develop their skills and show their skills. And then they're sharing. So they're sharing with authentic audiences beyond their classroom. So maybe they're sharing with another site, maybe they're sharing with another school, and maybe in a different district or something. So they're going kind of beyond just the four walls of their classroom. And then looking at the DOK level 4, so now they're designing, they're connecting, they're critically thinking about things, they're judging things, they're justifying, they're having to prove things, they're having to report on things. So it's just taking that to the next level, and it's taking them to really, really understand and really, really critically think about the evidence and the elements that they're interacting with within this lesson.
And so as you're creating your HyperDoc, maybe not your first one, but your second one, or maybe even your first one, you can spice it up. So you can add your Bitmoji. You can add the Bitmoji extension. That's what Marshall and I do to get our Bitmojis on our presentation. We just have the extension, and we click on the extension, and we're searching what kind of picture we want, and we just drag and drop it. You can add emojis. So there was a slide a couple slides ago that had a little smiley face emoji. You can add emojis by going to emojipedia.org. You can search any emoji you want, copy it, paste it where you want it. Adobe Spark. We've talked about Adobe Spark before, about how you can make videos, web pages, and different posts. Use Adobe Spark and create something amazing in 5 minutes using a template, and put that in your HyperDoc. Your students are going to be blown away by the artistic ability that you have by creating that Adobe Spark post. Add images, add pictures, and then there's a Google Doc that's linked here that kind of has explanations of different ways. So, okay, how could I use an emoji? How could I use a Bitmoji? What is Adobe Spark Post all about? So that Google Doc link kind of goes into some more ideas and has a written explanation of them, and also links to different ways that you can kind of spice up your HyperDoc and give your students' eyes something to look at. Because learning isn't just words on a paper. Pictures really do help our brain organize and develop that knowledge, because our brain works with visual imagery as well.
And then, so this is some more information and resources from HyperDocs.co. So they have an academy with a tons of free courses that you can go on and you can take to learn how to create HyperDocs, how to teach with them, those types of things. They have another one that has courses with many lessons that are specific to remote learning and remote instruction, like we're going through right now. And then, like Satara mentioned earlier, they have a Facebook group that they do live 30-minute shows every Saturday. And it just kind of talks about how to use HyperDocs, how you can teach with them, how you can integrate them into your classrooms, those types of things. So there's lots of free resources out there for you to kind of get started with HyperDocs. And even if you're using them, how to kind of continue using them and kind of how to enhance your lessons and whatnot, and kind of integrate them into your classroom.
And I feel like this is almost the most important thing, especially for the HyperDoc girls, because they created almost all of these templates that we are sharing with you, and they are giving it to us teachers for free. But the only way to access it is you have to go to File and then make a copy. So thou shalt not request access. You have to go to File and then make a copy. Please, 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 please. Never, ever, ever, when it says view only, hit request edit access or hit next to the share button, request access. Please don't do that. Anytime you open up any type of Google Doc, Google File, Google Slides, and you don't have access to edit or move anything, go to File and then click Make a Copy, and it'll make a copy for you in your Google Drive that you can move, you can edit, and you can use. Requesting edit access, they did that on purpose because that's their master copy. So it's like all of our masters that we have in our filing cabinets. And then by you going to File, Make a Copy, that's like you taking that paper, going to the Xerox machine and copying it for yourself. So anytime you open anything that we have linked or anything that the HyperDoc girls have linked on their site, please just go to File and then make a copy.
Yeah, because when you do like clicking on the view only and request editing access, then it's going to send them an email saying so-and-so has requested editing access. And I mean, anytime that I'm on one of their templates, there's easily 20, 30 other people on that exact document. So could you imagine if everyone clicked request editing access, how many emails they would get? So if it's something that you see and you want to make a copy of it, just go File, make a copy, and then it's you, like Satara said, you have your own version of it. You can edit it, you can change things around, you can make it yours.
And even if they gave you editing access, they can't. And the reason why is because you're requesting editing access to their master copy.
That's true.
So then if you were to change anything, you're changing their master, and then you're changing it for the thousands of other teachers out there. Yep. So anytime, not even with HyperDocs, anytime ever you're in a document and it says view only, go to File, make a copy.
Yep. And so here are some examples that we have hyperlinked for you for elementary HyperDoc examples. So they are broken down into categories, into subjects. So we have some science ones, we have some history ones, we have some ELA, we have some math ones. So if you are just kind of wanting to see what would this look like in my, third grade classroom, try to find an example that meets your standards and your needs and stuff, and go take a sample and see what it's going to look like. So these are just some here, but there's other examples on the hyperdocs.co website under their sample section. So these are some, but they have many more on their actual website as well.
And then here are a bunch of secondary examples. So there's science, history, there's different collections. So if you're doing novels or the SAMR model, there's world languages. So if you're teaching Spanish or French, or you're just kind of showing your students that there's different languages around the world and where those countries are, ELA, math, there's so many more. This is literally just a snippet from hyperdocs.co. If you actually click on samples and templates, you're going to get so many more. And we've linked to just folders and so many templates within this slide. Mm-hmm. So just explore them, look through them, see what's there. If you find something you like, go to File, make a copy, and use it. And when you go to File, make a copy, it'll make a copy in your Google Drive. And then you can click on the little folder icon, and we can show that in the Q&A. You can click on the little folder icon and you can organize it. That way you're putting all of these HyperDocs in a certain spot. And then to share them with your students, just send it to them in Google Classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's now something that they have. Anything they create, they're just uploading all their documents right in Google Classroom from their Google Drive as well. But this is a great way to have tons of secondary resources, and Marshall went over a ton of elementary resources, but this isn't even it. There's so much more on their website.
And so here are just some more examples and resources, and we've linked to all of them here. We'll also link them when the video gets posted. We'll link them in the description as well. So tons of resources. We're going to link to them here and in the description as well.
And then if you wanted to extend your learning with HyperDocs, go to hyperdocs.co. Almost all of these templates that we are sharing from, if not, I think all of them came from the HyperDocs lady from hyperdocs.co, because they're all educators, they're all teachers, and they said that we should just be sharing things instead of having to buy it from each other. So go to their website, look at all their templates. If you have a Facebook, check out their Facebook group. If this is something that you're gravitating towards, you can ask questions on Twitter. I tagged and messaged all of the creators on Twitter 2 days ago, asking them, like, do you have any extra resources I could share my teachers? And I got a response back from them. Mm-hmm. So they responded with links and information about the Facebook group. And one of the creators, Lisa, said, that this Saturday they're having a 30-minute session with Holly and they're going over that. So definitely connect with them, ask them questions, go to their courses, go to the Facebook group if that's something that you want, because they're so open and willing. All of us educators just want to share. So it's definitely something to check out.
Absolutely. And then here's just a little quote. If you always do what you always did, you will always get what you've always got. So, if you're always just kind of doing the same thing, you're always going to kind of get the same results. So HyperDocs is something different. It's something new. It's something that you can kind of integrate. You can change. You can kind of switch up things that you've been doing in your classroom. And I know I've used it in classrooms, and I know the students got a kick out of it. They loved it. They loved having the choice. They loved being able to kind of go through and work collaboratively and kind of show their learning and stuff. So it's definitely something that it might seem a little overwhelming, might seem a little daunting, but start small. Start with looking at some templates, looking at some examples. Go to the Facebook groups and just kind of start asking around. Talk to Sitar and I, see if we can support you. Just kind of start small. Don't try to dive in all by yourself. Like, if it's something that you're interested in, kind of just like we said, start small. Just kind of start looking at some samples and stuff, kind of wrap your brain around how this whole HyperDocs things work, and then you can slowly start integrating it into your lessons and integrating it into your classroom.
Definitely. And don't be afraid of, especially in the secondary level, asking your students what they think, asking them for feedback. It's something that I did all the time. And I would start it in a certain way, be like, I have to teach you this regardless. So did you like what we did? Or how could I benefit it? How could I change it to benefit you? How could I change this to make it to something that you would be more actively involved in? And kind of ask your questions that way to our secondary kiddos, and they really respond to that because they know I'm going to stand in front of you and I'm going to lecture you about physics all day long. I'm going to talk about electricity all day long. What is the best way? Because I tried some new things. What did you like? What did you not like? Let me cater my teaching to you because you're the learner. I'm supposed to do that. So definitely involve your students in their own learning process.
So this is all that we had for you guys today. Our next session is going to be talking about SAMR and the 4 C's and how we can kind of integrate those into our classrooms to ensure that we have some meaningful tech integration and that we're hitting those 21st century skills. So that is going to be next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And we wanted to thank you guys for joining us today. And we are now going to move into the Q&A section of our webinar.
So we have one question in the Q&A section, and it says, where would the work created go? Is there a way to have all the Google Sheets or somewhere so it is easy to find and give back to? So this is a great question. So if you already have a HyperDoc created, or you're looking at a template, when you go to File, Make a Copy, it's going to go in your Google Drive somewhere. There'll be a little folder in the very upper left-hand corner that you'll be able to click and kind of organize. But when you want to give it to your students, you'll give it to them through Google Classroom. That would be one of the easiest ways and the best way to kind of give everyone a copy of it. So you'll create an assignment, you'll attach this HyperDoc as an option for them, and then they'll open it, they'll be able to interact with this form. And then when they turn it in, they can turn in the HyperDoc into you if you're having them fill out certain aspects of the HyperDoc as well. Or if you're having them create on a different platform, they can then turn in those links to you as well, or turn in the actual attachments in Google Drive. So in Google Drive, when you create an assignment, there's a button that says add file for the students. They can add anything they want. So PDFs, documents, slides, links, they can add all of that to you. That way you have it all in one place. So it's easy for you to grade, easy for you to find.
I am going, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was gonna say, if you're having them work in groups, pick one person from the group, tell your students one person from your group, turn it in and make sure everyone's name's on all of it, or comment with everyone's names. That way you have to open less documents as a teacher. So if you have your students working in groups of 3 or groups of 4 for the entire thing, you're only opening like 8 to 9 per class period instead of opening 180 something of these documents. So that's definitely going to lessen the amount that you have to open and go through. And the grading and the learning process is still there as well.
I'm going to share my screen real quick and kind of show you where in Google Classroom where students can add the content that they've created through a HyperDoc. So we're going to pretend that this is a HyperDoc that I was working on. And so if I'm working on things within this HyperDoc and maybe everything's just clickable and it's right within that HyperDoc, then I can just click mark as done and I can turn it in. But maybe there's something in that HyperDoc that's going to take me out to a different platform that I need to create something. So then your students can go here, they can go to add or create, and then if they've made something on a different platform, they can add it here. So they can either add the link. So if I click on add, I can add the link to something. If I downloaded it, I can add the file. Or if I just had it saved in my Google Drive already, I can go there, I can find it there, and then I can attach it to this particular assignment.
Perfect. And then I think there was a couple questions I saw had popped up in the chat. The words in blue supposed to be links, and then someone in the chat answered, but I do just want to say it again. So on the links, when you go to our Tech and TUSD site and you're clicking on COVID-19, or you're clicking on the link that Marshall sends in the emails every morning, they'll take you to a document that has where the password and the joining for Zoom. When you click on that, before you click on that, you'll see to the left that it'll be in orange and it'll say click here, and that whole column is where all the slides are linked. So if you click on the actual slide copy yourself, then that's where everything will be essentially hyperlinked and clickable for you. That way everyone will be able to click and see those copies, see those templates as well.
Okay, so question that just popped in was, I'm thinking of making a HyperDoc for narrative writing. Would I just link all the work to a Google Sheet so that all the work for writing is one spot? Yeah, you could do that. I mean, that's a way, so it makes it easier for you as a teacher. So all the work is in one particular spot. You could definitely do that.
And then there was another question in the chat that said, I like the Headed to High School project to start, so that HyperDoc that was shown. Is that something you made and can share with a link or found on the HyperDocs website? So that was something that we found on the HyperDocs website, but in the slide itself, it's linked as well. So it'll link it to the actual document where you can go to File, Make a Copy, or you can also find it on hyperdocs.co. But if you really like that one, just find the page in our slide presentation and it's linked right to it. That way it opens it up.
All right. As always, if you guys have any questions that you can think of afterwards, shoot us an email. We're here to support you. We're here to help. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Have a great Friday tomorrow. Have a great weekend. And then we hope to see you next Tuesday when we are talking about the SAMR model and the 4Cs. All right. Have a good day, guys.
Bye.
Bye.